Hello.
Hey,
Hi
hello.
guys. That was jazz handsy. I've not done jazz hands before. That's new. I have done them before in my life, obviously, a drama graduate, but I've not done them on the blog.
I'm doing drinking. It's not the first time for that. On the vlog or elsewhere.
Nope, that's fine. I'm not currently, but I'm about to be. Today is April 28th.
Yes.
Which is day 39 of our lockdown. We have almost done our 40 days and 40 nights.
Oh, it's also my payday.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I hadn't quite dared check what my bank balance is because I'm on 80% of a part-time job and not a lucrative one. With the best will in the world to my employers, I don't think that could be argued.
That's fair. Mine are weekly, so at least what day is it today? It's Tuesday today.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe Friday we can afford to buy some shopping.
Dream.
Well, that's actually a thing that we need to sort of be bearing in mind is when we first went into lockdown, we were very organised and all arranged a online delivery.
Yes.
And we couldn't get a booking slot for 3 weeks. Now we're getting at the stage where we probably would normally be thinking about ordering some food online and haven't done so yet. And I think this is going to possibly have to be a trip to the supermarket. But I really don't fancy doing the social distancing and queuing system at supermarkets because just the pictures alone, because obviously we haven't been able to go to the big shops. But they're like pictures from outside because everybody has to queue with a trolley like 2 meters apart.
But how would
they look gargantuan. Well, because Alan's been driving us to vets, maybe Alan will drive us to the supermarket, but not go into the supermarket for us.
Because really, we need to do like a pet food shop and kind of bulk buy some pet food because it's so much more expensive.
It's so expensive in the corner shop,
and they will insist on keep eating.
Yeah,
ridiculous.
A lot of it.
So greedy.
And they have been snacking on the sides. Because this morning, I came down to a delightful sight of a massive pile of feathers and what was once, I assume, a bird, but was barely recognisable as a bird, which was grim. So it's not like we don't feed them, but yeah, they've started snacking on the sides. I was previously blaming Poppet for most of the things that got brought in, and I think when Poppet was first off out of commission, we didn't have any presents for about a week to 10 days, but the two little boys have been making up for that, and we have had loads, but they've been mainly rats and mice, which I don't like any little dead things. They're sad and they're cute and it's all a bit grim. But at least with rats and mice, you sort of think, well, they are animals that we don't have any desperate shortage of. But I particularly hate it when it's birds. Because quite a lot of little sort of garden birds in the UK, they keep like sort of sparrows and starlings and things, like they aren't doing too great. They haven't brought in any town pigeons, which actually maybe right now those pigeons might be a bit sickly and maybe they could. Once though, Poppet, I assume it was Poppet, I don't know, but Totem's never pulled off something quite this impressive, but Poppet brought in a live magpie once, which was impressive. It was very pissed off.
Mind you, the size of that rat that Arthur had in his mouth the other day.
That was pretty big. They're not fully grown yet either, Arthur and Ford.
Yeah, to scale, it looked even more impressive hanging out of a tiny cat mouth.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that was a rat. That wasn't the biggest rat I've seen, but that was a pretty big rat for a little cat.
A small rat, but given the size of Arthur's head, it looked quite impressive hanging either side of
it sort of had a bit of a look of a lion with a gazelle, didn't it? Like, it was quite impressive.
Pleased with himself. Didn't thank us for taking it off him, I don't think.
No. But yeah, they haven't brought in anything that are nearly dead yet either, which is good, because that's worse. That is worse. It's not worse for the animals, because actually sometimes you can sort of nick it off them, and if they've only just caught it, sometimes things can pull through, but the things that have been brought in by Arthur and Ford have been annihilated. It's pretty grim. But yeah, they definitely went to town with that bird. There was feathers everywhere, like more feathers than you'd think could come off such a small bird, but they were everywhere. So yeah, that's what we've been up to today. also did take Poppet to the vet. I did say yesterday that was the plan for today. Thankfully, all good news. It's all looking good. So no need for any tinkering, and just back in a week. Unless she does anything bad to the dressing. So again, we've still got to supervise, but that's all good news on that front.
She's just getting increasingly restless, being stuck in a bedroom on her own.
She's not on her own most of the time, by the way. We are spending time in there.
We do try and keep her company, but even then, sometimes she's just grumpy because she doesn't want to be in a room, even with us.
Yeah, she's not too pleased for the company, really. She just wants to get out. But
it varies. Sometimes she's
not a lot we can do there.
A bit affectionate, but other times, like if she was here and able to walk about, she would just want to piss off outside somewhere and not hang out with us. You know, it's like she's a teenage girl who's stuck in with her parents.
Yeah.
Oh, guys.
Oh, God, I want to go out.
Oh, stop it, Dad.
Yeah, bless her. Can we scooch just a tiny bit because Lucy's trying to jump up next to me? Ooh. It's all right. We should be fine. Just a little bit of bum scooching area.
Scooch this, then.
There we go. There we go.
That's more like it.
Come on then. So yes, there's a Lucy goose. There she is. Come on.
Hey.
There we go. So yeah, that was something that was fun today. Another thing that I've been doing, sort of carrying on from yesterday. By the way, mental health wise, today's been much better than yesterday. Thankfully, oh God, Lucy, come on, sit yourself down. Well, that was worth it. So yes, but I have carried on. Like, you don't just have one bad day and then just go, I'm fine now. So I carried on with what I was talking about. Check out my progress there, guys. That's looking fairly epic. It's not quite finished. There's 1 or 2 white bits left, but that is what I've been up to today. Which, as I say, is very satisfying, particularly if you've got good pens, which those are. And yeah, it just sort of keeps your brain busy enough. One thing that was less restful about doing that colouring today, though, was what was on the telly while I was doing it, which was bafflingly atrocious documentary. Documentary. That's giving it a loftier title than it deserves.
I decided I was going to log into the WWE network and watch one of their fine documentaries about WWE wrestlers.
I'm sure some of them are good.
But then instead of that, I chose to watch a really, really bad one.
It was atrocious. I admittedly came in because I'd been having a nap. Because I had to take Poppet to the vet this morning. Chris was very nice, actually, because Poppet was restless last night when we were just about to go to bed. So I was going to get up and go in with her, and then Chris sort of very kindly just said, oh, you've got to be up in the morning, I'll go in with her, and then if I sleep in there with her, it won't be any problem. That was a great plan. Except all of the other animals decided to be dicks all night. So actually I probably would have got more sleep if I'd been on the floor in with Poppet, but you weren't to know that.
No.
But yeah, they were repeatedly waking me up all night. So I didn't have a lot of sleep, so I did go for a little nap when I got back from the vet. And you put this thing on. So I came in about halfway through it.
It was about an hour into it by the time you came down.
Right.
And it is a 3-hour documentary. With about an hour's worth of kind of useful content in it. And that's
I think that's even being generous.
Well, that's if you're quite a big wrestling fan. Because I think, I'm aware that I am interested in this. It is deeply tedious for a lot of people. So just to kind of give a bit of context, basically in 1993, Hulk Hogan, who had been the figurehead and the most famous wrestler in the world and the figurehead of the WWF at the time,
I
left
think even
the company.
People who don't know anything about wrestling will have heard of Hulk Hogan. Pretty massive.
So he was a big kind of cultural phenomenon.
Yeah.
And so that year, Vince McMahon, head of WWF, had to try and find someone to be the new face of the company. And typically he went for sort of a big muscle-bound guy who looked quite striking in that regard, and also went for a kind of very all-American kind of jingoistic
very patriotic and gimmicky.
Which looks, kind of weirdly kind of naive and old-fashioned from 2020. But even in 1993, if you're watching it from this side of the channel, a bit hard to stomach the kind of rampant patriotism. A lot of USA chants and American USA, flags.
USA. And every bit of conversation he had was just like, American dream, and
there was a lot of talk about bringing the title back to the USA because the title holder at the time was a Japanese character, actually played by a Samoan guy, which again is something you wouldn't do now. But that Japanese character
was
wrestling
living and
all his
working in the
matches
States
for an American promotion, wrestling almost exclusively in the States. He certainly hadn't squirreled the belt away to Japan or even Samoa.
Or anywhere else they might have decided he was from.
So the idea that they were bringing it back to the States is kind of... But anyway, so this guy, they really tried to push this guy and make a big deal out of him to replace Hulk Hogan. It didn't really work. He was ill suited to the role. And this documentary kind of charts the arc of that character and that push.
He was doing a big campaign to lead up to his sort
of... They had a big kind of bus tour.
Big fight
driving
thing.
him across America, leading to his big title match at SummerSlam. And this document, they obviously filmed a lot of footage of that bus tour and events around it that they could use in kind of promotional packages and highlight reels and things. And what they've decided to do is to sort of splurge 2.5 hours of that content onto the WWE network.
Huge swathes of it did just feel like it was footage that they had, so they wanted to use it.
Like, yeah.
But it had no worthwhile content.
There was no sense
whatsoever.
of quality control or people judging which bits of content were worth using. It was just like, this is all the film that we have, we'll put it all out. I mean, Ellie came down and joined me during a section of the documentary that I think was literally 10 minutes of film of the tour bus driving along the highway. And that's it.
Yeah.
With
like really loud, grating engine
heads,
noise.
Nothing to provide context or colour.
So just
and that was interspersed by lots of clips of kind of interviews and PR events.
Radio interviews where you couldn't hear what the caller was saying. So half of radio interviews where he was talking to members of the public was interesting.
Often interviews by people who didn't really know that much about wrestling, because these were interviews that
just
he was
typical
trying to
press
do
tour
to try and penetrate the mainstream.
Yeah.
So for someone who actually knows about wrestling, these were very broad and general and uninteresting questions that were being asked. Like some of the bits of footage in between the chunks of film of just driving, some of the bits of interview and footage in between that were so dry and dull and disinteresting that when you got back to just the tour bus driving down the road, you felt like you were watching Steven Spielberg's Duel. That's, that was really the gripping bit. Just going, it's still on the road, it's getting there.
One of the sections, because a couple of times, because I wasn't watching it, I was sitting, and I deliberately sat so I couldn't even see it. I was sat facing away from it on the other chair doing my colouring in, but it just sort of permeating into my consciousness. And there was one section that was quite long. It was probably about 1.5 to 2 minutes long, where it was them arriving at a hotel where he was going to do a personal appearance and just chatting to the hotel manager, talking about where to park the bus and
this is a documentary where there was 10 minutes
where
of
the
just
tables were going to be set
footage
up, and it's even the people that are there living this aren't particularly interested in this exchange. This does not need to be in a documentary.
If you have a sort of fondness or nostalgia for that mid-90s period of WWF wrestling, there are interesting things to be seen, just in the way the guy was so kind of ill-cast in the role, and the whole experiment of it just failed. But like I say, you could cut that down to about half an hour of stuff, and basically the documentary is 3 hours long. It ends with a half-hour wrestling match, and we stopped that documentary about 2.5 hours in order to go and do something else instead. So
we had a time-sensitive thing.
Yeah, we had to go and do a sort of social thing with other people, which is, but we really stopped that at the exact point it was about to get good.
Well,
the exact point it was about to get fine, broadly fine, because it's not even a famously great match. It's a match that's kind of a very confusingly booked ending. So that's the thing I do with my time in lockdown.
Voluntarily. I was baffled.
I sort of tell myself that it's research and I'll one day write an article about it.
Okay, whatever justifies it to yourself, but I think you might have a little streak of masochism in you.
There was sort of a perverse sort of pleasure in just going, right, I'm just going to sit here and watch 2.5 hours of almost nothing happening. It's,
I don't know, maybe the world's a bit too chaotic and a bit too much happening in the world, so you're just like, I'm going to deliberately watch, literally, it might as well have been paint dry. Paint drying might have been more interesting. Because actually, paint drying at least wouldn't be irritating. Because, like, particularly with the long passages of them just going along highways, they're like really loud grinding engine noise and just they're in a big ugly tour bus. So just in case everyone wants to watch this documentary, what was it called?
It's called All Aboard the Lex Express, because it's about the wrestler Lex Luger. Because we've talked before about how there's a lot of people in lockdown, you know, and they're posting on Facebook and social media about all the productive things that they're doing, and that's great, good for them. If you're using your time productively, wonderful. But that can make people feel bad if they're not doing anything very productive with their time.
And that's where we come in.
And there's almost a thing of like, oh God, all I've done is watch, you know, that TV series. But at least maybe you've watched a TV series that you can, you've really enjoyed, and you can look back fondly. You've binged a box set you've been meaning to get round to, something you wouldn't have found the time for otherwise. So there's something in doing that. But I feel like this was really leaning into, like, I will be defiantly unproductive. I will watch 3 hours of a documentary that shouldn't exist.
Yeah, I don't know what got into you.
Yeah, but I think
I was very glad to have a colouring book at the time.
tomorrow I might watch like a
good one.
Yeah, a good one.
Okay.
With talking heads and some action and things. And it's going to be
content.
So good, man.
A documentary with some actual
really
content. Yeah.
Something else I've been doing to pass the time is I've found a Facebook group. Ellie's got her own little group about ants.
Yeah, I love my ants.
I have found a group on Facebook which is a group in which we all pretend that it is still the 90s. And it is a lot of fun.
I have been invited. I, like you with the ants, don't quite get it.
I think there are two main facets as to why it is good.
Yeah.
The first one is it is just a giddy nostalgia rush of just toys and games and music and fashion from the era in which we grew up.
Yes.
And the second way in which it is fun is in the way you can gently satirise current times.
I did enjoy those sort of elements a bit more because I'm like, oh, I know what you're doing. That's funny.
Things like I posted up a thing about the Blur versus Oasis chart battle being on BBC News, and sort of did a post about, oh, that's weird, something like this being on the news tonight, isn't it? But you know, I guess we should thank our stars. We live in a time where
not much is happening.
Not much sort of serious or depressing is happening to fill the news, and we can make room for this sort of stuff, which is obviously in stark contrast to the actual reality of the events that surround us. Or I did another one about John Major.
Yeah, I think that was my favourite actually.
So talking about how, John Major. I've heard people say that John Major isn't so bad, you know, and we'll look back and think, you know, it could have been worse. But honestly, I can't imagine how could it ever get any worse. There's a boring old John Major.
Oh, what I wouldn't give for John Major to be back.
Well,
literally, if I can't have a Labour government or actually anyone else or who's even vaguely on the left, I would settle for having like a Major-led Tory government right now. He sort of said it was very weird, but he was sort of quite sensible on the Brexit front, just being quite sensible on the NHS front, and I've been baffled. I was like, oh, I don't know what's happening to me.
Maybe, I don't know if he's mellowed in old age or just things have moved so far to the right that he now seems centrist by comparison, but
he really does.
He seems like quite a reasonable bloke, and there might be, you know, I'm 35, I was about...
Yes, we have to admit we probably weren't the most politically engaged during his time in office. I was around
sort of 10 when he was in power, or, you know, he was in power for a few years, but around that kind of age. Yeah. And so there might be people who were there at the time who have a better understanding on it, who could correct me. But it really feels like he was a lot more reasonable than Boris Johnson and, you know, people of that ilk. And, like... Again, people might correct me on this, but you almost have the sense that he seemed like a Tory that, although I disagree with his beliefs and his views, he seemed genuinely to want the betterment of the country and to try and look after the majority of the people in some way, even if he was going about it in ways that I disagreed with. Whereas now you look at our leaders and just go, they are just looking out for their mates and themselves, and it's all
They're
careerist.
doing what the very bare minimum they can get away with doing to look after the people.
Even now, even
during the time of global crisis. But speaking of that, well, actually, sorry, if you wanted to carry on your 90s thing.
I just wanted to say there are some people in this group where do find it, seek out this group and post pictures of things from the 90s and talk about them and pretend that we're still in the 90s. That's the key to it, though. You have to pretend you're still in the 90s.
Yes.
Like, some people get it wrong and they just post up a picture of a thing from the 90s and they're like, oh,
remember this?
Remember these guys? Oh, did you have one of these? And that's wrong.
You've got to say, I'm going to get one of these.
And those people are the very worst type of people, right? Because people who like and enjoy a thing that I like and enjoy, but in a slightly different way that I like and enjoy it, are worse than people who do not like and enjoy that thing at all.
I'm with you on that. It's like the people who try to be too individual in the ant colony. Like, no, you're missing the point. No. But actually, I was getting it. I think that was why, because I just glanced through a few posts on it, and one of the first ones was quite good. Somebody doing that kind of like knowledgeable little nod to what's actually going on. But it was about the film Outbreak, which I think came out in '98. And they said, oh, I can't wait to see this in the cinema. Can you imagine something like this actually happening? And then somebody else in the comments just went, oh, this is a film you should watch, and posted Contagion, which was from like 2013 or something. And you're just like, you've missed the point. But even on the like joining up thing, it says any posts that acknowledge that it is any later than January 31st, 1999 will be deleted. They are not allowed. If you allude to the fact that, like, if you basically break character, you're ruining it. And people do, repeatedly.
And those people, right, I hope something really bad happens to them. Like, I hope they stub their toe on a coffee table or whack their funny bone on a kitchen counter.
I hope they get the millennium bug.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't think we should joke about the millennium bug, because we'll wait and see what it's like when it happens. And it could turn out to be quite serious. So let's not just like be too flippant about it in case it turns out that a lot of people suffer from it.
Okay.
I know you're very cynical, but I worry that the millennium bug might be quite a big deal when it comes around.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's
the 90s, so we're not in lockdown. We don't have to stay in because of government orders, but we do stay in because we want to be here in case any of our mates knock for us to go out, and we've only got like 5 free texts a day on our Nokia 3310, so we've used them up.
And what we're talking to is not in existence.
Yeah, we can't be just using our mobiles all the time, so we just need to be staying in the house in case anyone wants to contact us on the landline. And that's the only reason we're staying in, isn't it?
Right. I think you've stretched it a little bit too far into... This isn't that group, though, Babs. Well, there's no real way to segue into talking about the real world if the real world is still stuck in the 90s.
Really good.
Which new Blur album? They had a few new Blur albums.
Yeah, on this occasion, I'm going to say the self-titled 1997 album Blur. It's got Song 2 on it.
It is a good one.
Yeah, and MOR and Beetlebum, which is actually a sort of more true evocation of the Beatles sound than anything Oasis ever did, even though I also like Oasis.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I quite like both.
A little bit of analysis for you.
I'm not too good at the whole Britpop war thing because I quite like both.
I used to buy all their stuff.
Yeah.
And I like Pulp as well, which were like the third way, weren't they? They're the third option.
Were you not allowed to like all three? Like, I remember, like, it was the rivalry for who'd get number one, but like, surely that means that lots of people like both.
Yeah, I certainly did.
Yeah.
But you couldn't admit that in the playgrounds.
I
Or someone would rip all the poppers off your Kappa jogging bottoms.
Steal your pogs.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway. So one of the things that when we were talking about, basically the current government not having the interests of the people at heart, and it doesn't feel like they do. Like, admittedly, we're quite left-leaning. We've always been fairly critical of a right-wing government. I think that's part of who we are. By
the way,
yeah,
and I know where you're going with this, but I just want to interject and say I feel like when we started doing these, we were quite sort of self-serious about it, and would like do a lot of stuff up top about the news,
Mm.
and then maybe do some fun stuff at the end.
Mm.
And in this, we've spent about 10 minutes talking about a 3-hour documentary of no value. Then we pretended we were in the 90s for a bit, and now, 25 minutes in, we're getting onto what's happening in the real world.
Yeah.
But,
well, because we're not spending any time in the real world,
yes.
we're only you're getting a little view into our world, and our world isn't reality right now.
Even though there's so much more social media keeping people together than they used to be, it does feel like maybe everyone is doing the same thing and living in their own fractured realities rather than kind of
definitely. I've sort of
fitting
lost
into the same schedule and
lost the plot a bit really when it comes to sort of social norms and timekeeping and all that sort of stuff.
Like we're filming this at 11 a.m, aren't we? And we're drinking wine and just having a... That's a lie.
That is a lie.
We should probably get onto Panorama.
Yeah, that's what I've been trying to get onto for like the last 4 or 5 minutes.
It's me, I'm white. I know that as well. I know it. I know that I'm the one doing this.
Yeah, so...
We should just crack on with it. Do it now then. Stop giggling. It's a serious bit, innit? Do about Panorama, probably. I didn't watch it, so you've got to tell it.
Okay.
When you're ready.
Yeah.
All right. Are you doing it now?
So, right, I was going into sort of the government and how we are looking at them. And I can't really... It's got to the point now where surely even fairly staunch Tory supporters, and quite a lot of them do seem to be sort of, hang on a minute, like, they're not necessarily being as outraged as I feel they should be, but there are people sort of going, that mistakes have clearly been made here. Never as do I think it has been made more clear in such a concise piece of filmmaking. But last night, Panorama did a programme, so it's a half-hour programme on the BBC. You can watch it on iPlayer. I wholly recommend everybody should watch this. It is well researched, well documented, and is talking to people that this affects. So talking to people within the NHS, talking to people in the supply chain, some of whom have had to have their voices disguised or be voiced by actors because they've been told not to talk to journalists about the truth going on. But basically the programme is called Has the Government Failed the NHS? And it looks into specifically the failings partially overall with the handling of the COVID crisis, but more specifically in terms of protecting the NHS staff dealing with it. So the main crux of it has been looking into the supply chain for PPE. Now, I recommend, whatever your political leaning, you should watch this. This shouldn't just be shouting into the void of people who already think that the Tories are doing a terrible job. It's very hard to look at it and be sympathetic to what they were trying to do. My main example of this, although there are many, and I highly recommend that you watch it, the main shining example of this, I think we mentioned it in our blog, was we talked about the criticism that the government were facing in terms of the lack of PPE. They announced on that day's press briefing that they had admitted that there were still delays in the supply chain, that they were working on it, but they had released 1 billion items of PPE to the NHS, with more on the way. Now, that sounds very good. Even though they admitted, well, they didn't admit, but everybody else who was actually on the front line was sort of saying, well, we're not getting it, we don't have it, so whatever you've released to us isn't enough. They fudged the figures to a ridiculous degree. That billion, so this programme goes into the breakdown of it. They have included in that cleaning products, for cleaning the wards, because the wards need to be clean to protect people, but that's not PPE. One of the best things, and this is a real shining example of political spin that makes me want to be sick in my mouth, is they counted each and every glove as an individual item of PPE. So 500 million items on that billion were gloves. So they've counted them as individual gloves, and they're saying that that's part of this billion.
But
so,
most people, as you'll know, need more than one glove, don't they?
Most people, yes.
Most people, not everyone, but most people tend to use gloves in pairs.
Usually, yeah.
So to count them as kind of one item is a little bit
it's a little misleading, and you have to assume they knew that.
The other thing that was a bit shocking was the way that they had. Oh God, it's gone right. What did it say? It's gone right out my head because we've got a minute left and I'm panicking.
Oh,
but well, the fact that they're gagging people though.
Yeah, the gagging orders that have gone to people who work within the supply chain.
Just gagging people, you know, like innocent people would do.
Yeah.
But oh yes, I know what it was because they downgraded. This is it.
Yes.
They downgraded the level, the severity of COVID-19,
so that they could say the necessary levels of PPE were lower. So, like basically, the World Health Organization said you need the top quality masks, visors, gowns, etc., etc., and that's what we were following. And then when they realised they didn't have enough of any of that, they just went, I know how we'll fix this problem. We'll say we need less in the official guidelines to doctors.
But it's like saying...
But doctors know what they need, and the reason they said for that was because the death rates were lower than anticipated. But that's absolute horse shit.
But it's like saying, don't worry, you know, HIV isn't spread by sex. You don't need condoms because you know there aren't enough condoms to go around.
Yeah.
So you just kind of
just saying. So don't worry. Just you don't need them.
Basically fine.
Yeah.
And it's just not. It's just lies.
It's just lies and spin, but dangerous lies and spin that will cost lives. It's already costing lives. Hundreds. Well, it's not in the hundreds yet. Over 100 NHS or frontline support worker staff have lost their lives to COVID already.
And you've got to
That's
think
going up.
Those staff are sort of dealing with different patients all over the hospital, so it's chains of
We've
transference.
We've
really got to go. Time has run out on us.
Time has run out on us, so if it cuts off, sorry. But yeah, so watch that. I will put the blurb. I will put the link in the blurb. Please watch it. Please share it, particularly with your right wing friends.
Right, we really got a key point about all aboard the Lex Express across. That's the main.
Yeah, that was the
takeaway.
important bit.
All right. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.